excited to really hear from Chip Judd. He is a graduate of the Citadel with a bachelor's degree of arts in chemistry and a master's in counseling. He served for over 40 years as a pastor, marriage and family counselor, coach and consultant to leaders, teams, and organizations. His experience and training combined to give him a unique and powerful insight into the blind spots and blockages most of us deal with in our personal life, families, and work. He currently serves as a staff pastor at Seacoast Church. He's been married for 45 years, and has 3 married children and 7 grandchildren.
So I'm sure that he's got a wealth of knowledge and experience to share with us. I do want to remind you that if you have questions, direct message Mark and Meliza Fender, and we'll get some times where we can ask Chip those questions. But without further ado, help us in welcoming Chip Judd. Welcome, Chip.
Hey, good to be with you guys. On the question thing, I love questions because questions kind of pull and draw things where you guys need them to go. So what the plan is for me to share for 15, 20 minutes. And at some point we will kind of stop and do some question and answers. And then, if depending on how that goes, I might share a little bit more, and then we'll do some more question and answers. So really be forthcoming with your questions, because that could be where some of the juiciest stuff comes from. And it was in what Mark and Meliza, right? Meliza, is that correct? It was in what Mark and Meliza read a minute ago, and I really appreciate them writing that up for me. It's really awesome how they did that. But I'm just teasing Mark. But I am a counselor. I've been a pastor and a counselor. And what does that mean? That means that for basically 40 years, and it just kind of, I don't know about some of you guys, but it just freezes me every time I say that. For about 40 years, I've been in what I call the guts and glory of people's lives. I'm so honored that people apparently, by the grace of God, trust me enough to share hurtful things they're ashamed of, things they're, victories, failures, places they've been hurt, places they've hurt others. And I was getting ready to talk somewhere sometime, and felt like it would be helpful. And I kind of made an estimate of how much counseling I've done. And I figured I'd done about somewhere in the neighborhood of 13,000 hours of counseling, meaning that 13,000 hours of my life that I've been what I call eyeball to eyeball with individuals, marriages, and families, talking through their challenges and hurts and pains. And, that's kind of what the lean of what we're talking about tonight is. And again, correct me later if you have to. Apparently Pastor Johnson's message was about recovering a marriage that's having some challenges, which what marriage doesn't. Without hesitation, I would say to you that building a great marriage is it's not easy. It's not easy at all. And in fact, just to get you thinking, I'm going to try to get this screen share thing going. So pray for me and ask God to give me the grace to get this working. Let's see, where are you? There you are. And it's going to take me just a second, but it shouldn't be too bad. I had it going a minute ago, so I think it's going to work. I think. All right. Can y'all see the screen there? Just nod your head or something, the few of you that I can see. Here's what I want you to think about for a minute. what would be your best guess at the percentage of marriages that finish well? And here's what I mean. If you look at the second one, what does finishing well mean to you? What I don't mean they stayed married. I mean you're married 5 years, 10 years, 15, 20, 30, and you actually still like each other. You're still growing together. You still we're adults, so I'll go ahead and go there. You still do the boom boom every once in a while. You're I think all of us start out with a picture of where we want it to go. And gosh, what percentage? Just think about it. Mark and Melissa, you can unmute yourself, I think. What would you say? What would your percentage be?
My wife wants to answer for me.
I would say 50%.
You think 50% finish well?
Yeah.
I don't think that high.
Okay, what do you think?
I think it's probably close to the 30.
Okay. All right, everybody watch. We're going to watch an argument break out.
Come on. It's
50, 30. Let's meet in the middle and say
50,
40.
30. 50 and 30, that's 80. No. You can't do that kind of math, no?
All right, well, while I've got you, since it'd be too hard to do this with everybody, look at the next one. What have you seen that keeps marriages from finishing well? What would be some of the things that you think derail marriages, keep them from getting where they need to go, want to go?
Selfishness.
Yeah, I'd say lack of communication.
Mark, why'd you look at Melissa when you said that?
Did I noticed that.
I was going to say, because I think she was going to look at me. I just wanted to it's a preemptive move.
I just wanted you to know I caught it. And so did she. So.
Oh yeah, I didn't realize you was watching my body.
Chip.
So
watching my body language too closely, sir.
So selfishness. What else?
I think just different vision. Different vision. Maybe sometimes at the beginning of the marriage they have a unified vision, and they don't continue to discuss and evolve that vision together, and this diverges.
Right.
Okay.
I would say lack of communication.
That's a biggie right there, Ryan.
Yeah. And if anybody is messaging you and they have any cool stuff, you can share that.
They are.
Yes.
So there's finances, money,
pride, different expectations or unreasonable expectations.
Unforgiveness is another one that's in the chat.
Oh yeah, unforgiveness.
Right.
Illness.
Illness.
Unspoken expectations.
Yeah. Or a gap between expectations and reality.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, for sure. Adultery, money.
Right. All right. One of the things we're going to talk about, but I'll go ahead and say it here. We won't get into it probably right this second. But when you talk about expectations, when you talk about a lot of the issues that were just raised, here's where my head goes. Expectations come from, this is going to sound a little weird at first. Expectations come from our childhood. It's in our childhood that we get a sense of what it's supposed to look like. Even if we know it's not what we want, it's the only thing we've ever seen. And contrary to what we seem to believe, we don't automatically know how to do marriage. We just don't. If we're not taught it, if we don't see it, if we don't get exposed to it, it's not inside of us waiting to come out, if that makes sense. And we'll talk more about that in just a minute. What about the last one? How can we help each other? What do y'all think, Mark and Melissa, and some of the people? How can we help each other?
How have I helped you, honey? Well, it's a legitimate question.
Dude, you're asking for trouble.
You know how I think we help each other? We are here this evening. We go to a lot of events. We read books. We
invest time.
We invest time into our marriage.
We refine our marriage. I think that's critical, right? We invest time.
It doesn't happen by itself.
And we're honest too. We don't assume that we are where we were yesterday or the day before or 5 years ago. So our marriage is evolving, we're changing. And
what you're addressing right now, I don't know that we're going to talk about tonight, but it's what I consider one of the top 3 to 5 things that makes a marriage flourish. And this is the way I say it: never stop growing.
Yeah.
Never stop growing. And we're going to talk indirectly, we'll talk about it here in a minute. But yeah, you guys went straight there, that part of what keeps your marriage fresh is you guys stay fresh.
Yeah, let me share a couple of the some of the couples here.
Okay.
Honesty and communication.
Okay.
They talked about marriage, therapy, intentionality for sure.
Right.
Being willing to listen. Sometimes we're so ready to rebuttal. We're not very good listeners sometimes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Asking your spouse, what can you do for them?
Mm-hmm.
And listen to the response and actually do it. Spiritual growth. I love this one. Water in your garden, right? The pasture is not green on the other side, right?
Honesty and communication.
For sure.
Man, you guys are good.
Yeah.
Oh, we're not good. It's our couples. They're incredible.
Yeah, you're good. All right, look at this scripture. Enter through the narrow gate, for wide is the gate and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gate and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. Here's what I'm trying. I'm not trying to be discouraging, but here's the deal. Parable of the sower. By the roadside, rocky soil, among the thorns, good soil. 1 in 4. Here's the thing, guys. You having a great marriage isn't an accident. It's the result of looking for and finding a road, a path, a way of doing life together that unfortunately is becoming harder and harder to find in our culture right now. So I don't mean it to be discouraging. I want it to be encouraging. You're here. And that tells me already that you've separated yourself from the majority of people breathing God's air right this moment. And so we're going to talk around and toward that. But here's a couple of thoughts. What I'm going to kind of do is talk to you like, we were in counseling. And let's just be honest. I don't know if I can remember a single counseling appointment where when I asked the question, there's no fancy way to start your first session. So you ask a dumb question like, why are we here? I mean, think about that. Imagine me and you as a couple. We had just met, sitting down in my office or wherever. Bottom line is, hey, hello, small talk. But sooner or later, I'm going to have to ask the question, why are we here?
Oh, yeah.
And here's the deal. Nobody ever says, my marriage is great. I just want to make it better. So I'm going to pay you money to help me make it better. They don't do that. Why are we here? Because something's broken, because something's off track. And I'm going to show you a little diagram in a minute that is a sad diagram if it's not used properly. But so here's the deal. John 1:14 says, Jesus, the word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we beheld his glory. The glory is of the only begotten of the Father. And then it says this: he was full of, anybody remember, grace and truth. Grace and truth. A minute ago when I was asking how can we help each other, a thought I had was the word grace. Because here's the deal. If you don't learn to receive grace and give grace, receive grace from God and give grace to others, it's going to be tough. It's going to be tough. But here's my point. You come and sit down in front of me. My goal is to give you the opportunity to experience equal amounts of grace and truth. Grace and truth. Grace draws you. Truth changes you. Grace says, I love you just the way you are. Truth says, but I love you too much to leave you the way you are. So when I meet with you, why are we here? And you begin to tell me, he this, she that, we this, we that, whatever. The first thing I want you to feel is the grace of God. I want you to feel normal. I want you to feel special. I want you to feel wonderful. I've learned this, and I really ask you guys, please listen carefully to this. I make a decision before I sit in front of you. I've already decided. I believe you're doing the best you can with what you have. Husband, wife, when you sit down in front of me, I believe you're doing the best you can with what you have. Now, some people are like, dude, what are you talking about? You don't know what she does. You don't know what he does. You don't know what they're like. Well, let me ask you to think about something. Have you ever met an abusive person who wasn't abused? Have you ever met a yeller who wasn't yelled at? Have you ever met someone who's emotionally manipulative that wasn't emotionally manipulated? Are you following where I'm going? In other words, here's the deal, guys. I'm a mess and you're a mess. Let's just settle it. I'm hurt and you're hurt, probably in different ways. And hurt people. So what happens is I hurt you and trigger you, and you respond, and you hurt me and trigger me, and I respond. And 3 months in, we feel like we don't even know this person anymore. So you sit down in front of me. I ask that question, why are you here? I just want you to know you are doing the best you can with what you have. Now, that doesn't mean you can just sit there and chill. Here's how I like to say it. You may not be responsible for the way you are, but you are responsible for changing the way you are. How many of you got to pick your family? I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit here, but think about that a minute. How many of you got to pick your family? How many of you remember being a disembodied spirit floating around, and God the Father came to you and said, Chipper, to me, Chipper, would you go down to earth and be Leroy and Emily, my parents' names? Would you go down to earth and be Leroy and Emily's number 6 of 7 kids and grow up in Tonawanda, New York, a suburb of Buffalo? Anybody remember that? Anybody remember filling out a preference sheet? I want a dad who's warm and friendly, approachable, kind. You see where I'm going? Anybody remember filling that out? By the way, I want him to make lots of money. Anybody remember, I want a mom who's just funny and cheerful and, invites all the kids over. We got to, anybody remember that? Here's the deal, guys. I believe with all my heart, I've been doing this 40 years. I believe 80 or higher percent of the issues you deal with in your adult life are rooted in your childhood. What are you talking about, dude? How you give and receive love, how secure you feel, how much of a risk taker you are, how quick or slow you are to trust others. All of that's rooted in childhood. So what am I saying? You sit down in front of me and you say, we're here for this. We're here because communication, our sex life's all jacked up, whatever. I've already decided you're doing the best you can with what you have. You either are missing something you need, or you've got something you didn't need and haven't gotten over it yet. And what I'm saying to you is this, guys. What if you learn to give yourself that kind of grace? What if you learned to be that nice to yourself? And then what if you learn to give that kind of grace to your spouse? Now, I'm not talking about an excuse. There's a difference between an excuse and an explanation. But what if you start off by, have you ever met somebody and you knew right away you weren't going to like them? God forgive me, but you could never figure out what it is. I went to this church one time, and my wife and I, and we were there for the week. We got there on Friday, and we were going to do some staff appointments on Saturday, and then we were going to speak at the church on Sunday and go home. So we go to dinner with the pastor and his wife that night, Friday night. And dude, I'm telling you, we weren't 5 minutes into dinner, and my wife and I were like kicking each other under the table. Like, we could not believe.
They like people.
We could not believe how brassy and arrogant and just the energy on one of the two people was so, you know what I mean? It was just like, oh my gosh, dude. And I'm sitting there thinking, I got to spend the whole weekend with these people, man. I'm like, Lord Jesus, this could be a hard weekend. Now, how many of you ever met somebody and felt like, I'm not going to like this person? Well, the next morning, I told you I was going to be doing appointments with the staff, right? The next morning, my first appointment was them. And here's the deal. It was the wife. I heard her story. How many of you have ever not liked somebody and you kind of judge them, and then you heard their story? You know what I'm talking about? When I heard her story, gosh, I was so proud of her. It was amazing, the things in her childhood that she had survived and grown through. Here's a phrase that I like. If someone else's behavior doesn't make sense to you, you're missing a part of their story. If someone else's behavior doesn't make sense to you, you're missing a part of their story. Because I can tell you this, the way we act makes sense to us, or we wouldn't do it. Now, here's the problem. It makes sense to us because of the life we've had. I get insecure and defensive and blow up bigger than I should. Why? Probably because of something that happened or didn't happen in my childhood. Am I talking to the right people? All right. So what'll typically happen is, and I'm going a little bit longer than I said I would, but then we'll stop in a few minutes for Q&A. What'll typically happen is somewhere in that first session or two or so, I'm going to ask what I call the $1 million question. The $1 million question. Now, I got to be careful with this because I got to set it up, because hopefully, and hopefully that some of you couples are struggling, but hopefully couples that are challenged right now had the courage to come on the call. That's what I mean by hopefully, because I want this to help you. All right, here's the $1 million question. I'm sitting there in front of couples. I've done this hundreds of times, and I've learned how important this question is. Here's the question. Now, I got to set it up. When you stood at the altar, not now, when you stood at the altar 1 year ago, 5 years ago, 10 or 20 or 30 or 40, when you stood at that altar, did you believe the best you were able that it was God who brought the two of you together? Let me ask it again. The question in its simplest form is, do you believe God brought the two of you together? Now here, again, I'm going to qualify it. I don't mean right this second, would you do it again? If you're struggling, your answer might not be good. But when you stood at that altar, the best you were able to discern, did you believe at that time that God brought you together? Let me tell you something. 40 years counseling, I could not fill one hand with the number of people that didn't say yes. I'm talking marriage is crazy in trouble. And when I carefully laid that question out, when you stood at that altar, did you believe God had brought you together? I could not fill one hand with the number of couples that did not say yes. Now, why is that so important? Because here's the deal. That's a question you ask one time, you answer it, and you never ask it again. You never ask it again. Because here's the deal, guys. God has a purpose for your marriage. Now, you know what? It's not what Hollywood's selling. It's not what our culture's selling. I got some good news and bad news for you. The purpose of marriage is not to make you all happy and cuddly and warm and fuzzy. Not the purpose of marriage. The purpose of marriage isn't even to meet your need for love.
Yeah, I know.
That's not the purpose of marriage. The purpose of marriage is the same purpose that everything else has. And that's to gradually, incrementally, and lovingly bring you into a fuller expression of who Jesus is, to become more like him. If you don't remember any other thought, please think about this one later. Marriage is a mirror. In the mirror of your marriage, you see yourself the most clearly. Somebody needs to mute themselves that has a child. If you could do that, please. Child just coughed. If you could just mute yourself, that would help. In the interactions you have with your spouse from day one, you have the opportunity to see yourself more clearly than you can anywhere else. And I hope you're confident enough, secure enough to agree that what you see in the mirror of marriage is not always pretty. So what's that got to do with anything? Look at this slide. I hope you can see it well. It's called the S curve, but this is what I call the growth cycle of everything. Everything follows this cycle. What do I mean? Your prayer life, your sex life, your communication, your success at work, everything follows this pattern. Now, what do I mean by that? This is what life really looks like. Over on the left there, I hope it's left on your screen. You get married. That's the startup. And you kind of have a honeymoon. It's like, wow, we're doing the boom, boom. We're kind of getting to know each other. But here's what happens. Sometimes in a week, sometimes it takes months. You're going to hit a moment where, the luster comes off. The shine comes off the apple or something. You know what I'm saying? You're gonna be 3 months in, and maybe your wife says, darling, I enjoy, man, I'm enjoying our marriage, but we just don't talk very deeply. We kind of laugh and have fun, but I want to hear how you're doing. I want you to share your heart with me. I want to feel what you're feeling. Now, what you just did, if you look at the picture there, you just hit that little star. I call it a crisis. I just call it a challenge. Now, here's the deal. What you were just given is an invitation to grow. The person you love, the person you married, the person God's given you responsibility to minister to, has said to you, there's something about the dynamic between us that's not meeting my needs. You know what? I probably need to pay attention. And I'm using the example I'm using, guys, because not to pick on us, I can pick on the ladies too. But here's the deal. This would be a good response. Baby, I really want to learn to do that, but nobody's ever taught me. I don't know. I don't know how to share my heart. I don't know. Guys just don't do that. I was raised by a man who didn't do that. He was raised by a man who didn't do that. Now, not an excuse, but an explanation. Now, here's where it gets tricky. What if I don't feel like growing? You see that arrow turning downward? What's going to happen is our marriage starts to slip a little bit. Now, another 2 or 3 months later, I'm going to my wife saying, baby, we're not boom booming like we used to. And what I forget is she talked to me about sharing my heart with her. And what we don't realize is a deep emotional connecting conversation with my wife is as important to her as sex is to me. Any of you ladies say yes to that? And I'm not saying sex isn't as important to you ladies. That's not what I meant. But that deep connecting, emotionally bonding conversation is what opens your wife up to want to be with you physically. So it's not like she's withholding. It's like the buttons that need to be pushed to open her up to be ready just aren't being pushed because she needs more of you. Now, what am I getting at? Guess what? It's an opportunity to grow. And what happens is, here's the thing. I wish I could point and do whatever, and maybe I could if I knew what I was doing. But here's the thing. When somebody shows up in my office, if you follow that downward arrow, follow it down and to the right, and down about halfway further is when they call somebody like me because my marriage is in trouble. And they don't remember what. Remember my question, why are you here? Now they're down and to the right, and they're not communicating, they're not having sex, things are in disarray. And that's what they say why we're here. But that's not why you're here. Why you're here is 3 months ago when your spouse, your husband, or your wife said, I need this from you. And you didn't want to learn how to provide it. Almost always, what throws a marriage off is a legitimate desire for something the other person legitimately doesn't know how to give. Well, that's not a pass. That's an invitation to grow together. Let's say you say, yes, I want to figure this out. That Mark guy, he seems to be pretty good at communicating with his wife. I'm just joking because I don't really think he does. He doesn't seem like he's got much sense, really. I'm kidding. But let's just say, I've said, they look like they connect pretty well. I'm going to ask him if I can take him to coffee. So you take him out and buy him coffee and say, hey, dude, my wife told me I don't share well with her. You know anything about that? Oh, yeah. Melissa told me the same thing about 10 years ago. And you know what? It was hard. It didn't come naturally. But you know what? We got there. And you know what else? Ooh, did it pay off? Ooh, baby, did it pay off? All I'm saying is this. When the marriage hits rough spots, I'm not saying it's always this simple, but I'm telling you, way more than not, it's life/God using the mirror of your marriage to show you an area in which he wants you to grow. And we're going to mix some grace with that here in just a minute. But let me give you a look at what life can look like. This is what life really should look like. Life, your marriage should go through seasons where it's just like honeymoon time. But then you're going to hit an area where you're in the hot seat, and then another, and it's something you need to learn. But if you'll submit to the journey, baby, you really have stepped up your game. Man, we have conversations and I feel so connected to you. I just can't believe how much you've grown in that area. Up you go. Now, sooner or later, you're going to hit something else. Why? Because God wants us to keep growing, and there's no end to it. He wants us to keep growing. All right, why doesn't it happen? Start at the bottom right. We misunderstand God's ultimate purpose. Again, God's ultimate purpose isn't for your needs to get met. God's ultimate purpose is for you to grow into his image and likeness, and for you to learn to love like he loves. And if you get that window there in the red box, check box, there's a dash box, is one of the most important moments of your entire life. I had issues with pornography. I was a scoundrel when I married my wife. I mean, I was a scoundrel. I was raised American heathen. We didn't go to church. I did drugs. I chased women. I cheated on everybody. I lied to everybody. My wife shouldn't have married me. I got saved a month after we got married. A month after we got married. And I mean, I got saved, man. Ooh, Jesus, thank you. I got saved. But how many of you know when you're saved, you're complete but not finished? You know, you're complete but not finished. And so a few years into my marriage, some sexual stuff showed up. Now, I didn't have an affair. I didn't do anything crazy, but I pressured my wife to fulfill my fantasies. And my fantasies didn't come from God. They came from Playboy and porn and my misbehavior. Well, I tried to make it her fault. I did everything I could to, you know, baby, I'm not asking you to do anything wrong. And I wasn't. I just wanted to spice it up a bit or whatever. And I'll never forget, as long as I live, I was praying one day and I was telling God how selfish my wife was, how she needed to just understand sex is meant to be fun and rah, rah, rah. And how many, you ever prayed and you can tell nobody's listening? I was praying my heart out. Nobody's listening. I finally stopped and I said, God, you're not paying a bit of attention to me. And he said, Chipper, you're the problem. You're the problem. And I said, pardon me? And over the next months, he slowly but surely showed me that I was the reason our sex life was all jacked up. It was hard. It was the hardest thing my wife and I've ever been through. But Lord, thank you, Jesus. It brought us to such a sweet place. And she watched me wrestle to grow from who I was to who God wanted me to be. Does that make sense? Mark, I can see you. Does that make sense? Okay. All right, so look it up at the right. What happens is when you hit that point, and marriage is good, you're going to hit that point, man. You're going to. And in the second part of our time today, hopefully, we're going to talk about how we get there. But you got a choice to make. And if you fail to choose life, growth, and change, you're going the downslide instead of the renewal. And a lot of it is mismanaging conflict, just not using conflict well and learning from it. I love this statement, don't waste your pain. How do you not waste pain? Learn from it. Learn from it. All right, let's take a minute and see if we got any questions. What are y'all thinking?
Well, yeah, we got a number of questions here, Chip. We have a couple. They're asking, hey, you know, what if there's conflict in a marriage and it appears as though just one person with the problem, and there's only one person going to counseling? You know, how can you kind of restore balance when it appears as though only one of the spouses is making the effort?
Okay, remember, I believe you're doing the best you can with what you have. If you're not making the effort, there's got to be reasons. And here's the deal. Is my going to counseling blessing me and helping me grow, well, then why am I fussing because I'm the only one going? In other words, here's what I would say. Darling, I love you. Husband or wife. Darling, I love you. And I really, really, really would love it if you'd go to counseling with me. But here's the deal. I'm gonna grow and get healthier. I'd really love for you to come with me. But I'm gonna really grow and get healthier. And I hope you see it and appreciate it and enjoy it. But I sure would love it if we do it together. But I'm going whether you come or not.
Yeah.
And here's the thing. Here's what I've learned. You can't lose doing that. Why? Let's say the other person never gets on board. Have you grown? Have you gotten healthier? Have you gotten stronger? Well, then you didn't lose. You didn't win everything you wanted, but you didn't lose. Don't spend your life waiting on somebody else to do what you think they ought to do.
That's good.
That's good. I have another question here. Is there ever a point where you can't turn back towards growth? So looking at that chart, what you just showed.
Yeah. Uh-huh. Is there other, explain now? I'm not sure I'm following.
So I think what it means is there ever a time where you see where it's heading for a decline, where you can't head up towards a renewal?
When you can't recourse, resell, set back up towards growth,
reset the course.
Renewal.
All right, let's combine the two questions. Is there ever a time when together you can't recover growth? Maybe. Is there ever a time when you can't? No. If you decide to grow, no one can stop you. No one. But you're not always guaranteed the other person's going to go with you.
That's good. Can you? I think I got another question that's got posed. But when we came on the call, I prayed. I thought I was so pretty secure in this that you were going to speak to my wife because I know she needs to change.
I agree. I can sense that.
but can you speak to maybe the couples that really some are on this call thinking it's not me that needs to change, it's my spouse that needs to change?
It's an absolute total waste of life's energy. Because here's the deal. There's only one person you're responsible for. There's only one person you have the authority and power to direct in any manner, shape, or form. And let's be honest, you're not even very good at managing that one yourself. So here's the thing, man. The best way for me to get you to change is for me to change. The best way for me to encourage you, draw you, entice you, is for me to say, you know what? I got some areas I need to work on. Now, if I catch myself, my next thought is yours are worse than mine. Well, number one, you're probably wrong. And it's a waste of time. You know what? I'm gonna grow. I'm gonna change. And I really pray to God. I really pray to God that you'll come do the same. But you know what? I'm going to be a different person next year this time. I'm going to be a different person next year this time. And I'd love for you to be right next to me. But I'm going. And I don't mean, I hope you don't hear it like a spiteful, like, well, I'm going whether you go. That's not what I mean. I mean, excuse me, let me mute so I can cough a second here. Oh, never mind. I can't find, there it is. I mean it in a broken, loving way. I really hope God helps you see the beauty and invitation of growth, because I think I see it and I'm going there. I really would love for you to come with me.
That's so true. Yeah. So good.
So I have another question here. How do you know when you're headed toward crisis in your marriage?
All right, fellas, what's one way you know? There ain't no boom
Is
boom
it that
happening.
boom boom thing? I know it's related to boom boom thing.
There
I
ain't
know
no boom. There ain't no boom boom happening. No, I'm sort of kidding, but you know, I heard a guy say one time, if you don't love God more today than yesterday, more this year than last year, you're backslidden. Now, I'm not saying I agree with that, but here's my point. If you're married, I mean, if you look at the diagram that's on the screen right now, if your marriage is not on the upcline, it's either plateaued or declined. Both of those are telling you something. And I was about to say neither one of them are good. The plateau is good if you're using it to tell you what you need to work on so that you can get back on the incline. But how do you know your marriage is in trouble? You don't laugh together. You don't talk. You fuss over dumb stuff and you keep having. How many of you would agree? Most marriages have the same fight over and over. It might look a little different, but it's the same fight. And I would just encourage you that it's not hard to tell if your marriage is not going where you want it to go. Let me give you some proactive ways to prevent that. I mean that specific thing. How can we tell if our marriage is not going in the right direction? What if imagine once a month, I mean this, once a month, you have a meeting where you ask your spouse, how am I doing loving you? How am I doing? And you just put tape over your mouth and shut up. You don't defend yourself. You don't explain anything. You just listen. Well, baby, you're doing great. Here's the thing. If you're in a good place, what you're going to hear is, baby, you're doing great for about a minute or two. And then you're going to hear, but there is an area you could probably up your game. That's when you want to be paying attention. And then it's your turn. And the other spouse says, how am I doing? How could I love you better? And he puts tape over his mouth and just listens. Listen, man, you make it a habit of doing that about once a month, your marriage ain't gonna drift into trouble and you not know it.
I have another question for you. How do I help my spouse understand boundaries with family?
Oh, Jesus, help me. That's one of my favorite things to talk about. Leave, cleave, and become one. If you don't do one, you can't do two. And if you don't do two, you can't do three. The moment you say I do, every relationship you have changes. Every single relationship on earth changes. You no longer relate to any other human being the same way you did 30 seconds before you said I do. Now, every moment of your life, every decision, every dream, everything is thought through. How will this affect this person that I'm now one with? And you know what? That ain't mom, and that ain't dad, and that ain't your brothers and sisters. I like to say this because it stirs people up. If you talk to your parents every day, you have not left home. If you talk to your parents every day, you are robbing from your spouse what belongs to him or her, because you're getting emotional needs met from your parents that your spouse is supposed to meet. Do you really mean that, dude? Yes, I do. Yes, I do.
Yeah, I got a question. One of the couples were asking, how do you do the balance when one is at home, maybe a stay-at-home mom, and the other is perhaps working all the time, and it seems to be they just seem to be out of balance.
Again, I start with grace. You're doing the best you can with what you have. So it's always good to start there because there's reasons. Is that where my identity and worth and value are tied up? Did I grow up with a sense of poverty, and I've made a covenant with my soul that I'll never be poor, so I work till my legs fall off? You know what I'm saying? There's reasons we do what we do. Now, what I'm saying, the reason I'm saying that is that affects how you approach the conversation. Doesn't mean you don't have the conversation, but you have the conversation that, baby, I believe if I asked you the question, who's more important, me or your business, you'd say me. But the way you use your time and energy doesn't agree. And there's times in a marriage, now again, remember how I set that up. There's times in a marriage you got to have some tough conversations, but it's going to come a whole lot better if they're coming from a place of, I want to understand why the way you're living makes sense to you. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Let me, I do want to talk about a couple more things.
Sure.
So let's do that. And then we'll probably, we end at 9:15, right? So
Yes,
we'll have time for a few more questions. All right. The reason I want to do this is it's kind of, actually, we're going to go exactly where you just were a second ago. All right. This is the verses we were just talking about. The Lord God said, it's not good for man to be alone. I'll make a helper suitable for him. And then skipping down, that's why a man leaves his father and mother. If we were together in person, I'd make you say leaves. His father and mother is united with his wife, I'd make you say that. And they become one flesh. Here's the thing, guys. You can't do two till you do one. You can't do three till you do two. Well, you can do it, but not well. And I love the last verse. Adam and his wife were naked. Now, I don't mean I love it because of boom, boom. I mean, I love it because psychologically, what that means is they were fully exposed and known. Listen now, flaws and all. And how much shame did they feel? 0. Do you know what we're all starving for? We want one place on this planet that I can be what I am, jacked up, weak in this area, strong in this one. I can be completely naked and exposed and still be loved. We're all starving for that, man. Just somewhere that you see me and you don't pretend I don't have flaws, because I do, but you still love me. Does that make sense? And that's what we're all hungry for. Now, how do we get in trouble? Well, Genesis chapter 3, the serpent comes, sin happens, they fall. God comes looking for him in the garden. Adam, where are you? And he says what to me is one of the most top 3 to 5 important scriptures in the whole Bible. I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid. 10 verses, man. They were both naked and felt no shame. 10 verses later, fear, shame, and isolation. Fear, shame, and isolation. Fear that if you really get to know me, you won't like me. So I hide. Fear, if I really make myself vulnerable to you, you're going to hurt me. And here's the deal, guys. You can't have intimacy without vulnerability. Now, here's where it gets tricky. We're already hurt. We're already hurt. So guess what we do? We trigger each other's hurt. And then we don't act very nice. And that triggers your hurt. And then you don't act very nice. Now, here's what we need to do. We need to be big enough to say, baby, I know my actions trigger your pain. I'd love to help you figure out where that pain's coming from. You know what, baby? I know my behavior triggers yours. I'd love to help you figure out where yours is coming from. Now, where are we going? The most powerful force in our development is the family. Nobody would disagree with that. But here's where it gets a little uglier. The most destructive force in our development is the family. Everything about you goes back to your family. My dad didn't know how to show love. My dad didn't know how to express emotion. I would have done anything to make my father proud. And he was, you know what I'm saying? He just didn't know how to show it. I mean, he loved me, but he didn't know how to show it. So I grew up craving my father's love and respect. I didn't know how to experience intimacy. My family, if you ever saw the show Roseanne, that's what my family was like. Sarcastic, rude. We loved each other, but we never showed it directly. So when I became a teenager, sex was love to me. Sarcasm was friendship to me. Well, when I got married, that didn't work too well. And I had to figure out what was I going to do about that? Look at this one. What we live, we learn. What we learn, we practice. What we practice, we become. Remember what I said about picking your family? I feel very confident saying this. Everything about your spouse you wish was different. They didn't choose. I promise you, they did not choose it. And you know what I'll bet you money on? They would love to change it. They would love to. No, you don't know my husband. No, you don't know my wife. Yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. Here's the deal, guys. It started so early in our life, we don't even hardly see it. The marriage is bringing it out to give us the opportunity to see it. But if all we do is fuss and fight and point fingers at each other, we're not going to be very helpful. Not going to be very helpful. Look at this verse. I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, visiting iniquity. If we were in person, I'd say iniquity. Most people misquote this verse and they say visiting the sin of a father. Not true. Why is it important? Sin is the act. Iniquity means to be bent or crooked, meaning what you inherit from your parents and the generations before you is not the sin, the act. You inherit the tendency or predisposition toward the act. What does that mean? How many of you agree alcoholism runs in families? Abuse runs in families. Why? Because the iniquity, the curved bentness of one generation is passed on to the next. Now, listen to me carefully. It does not mean you're going to automatically have that issue. What it does mean is you're possibly going to have to fight the issue harder than I might. Does that make sense? It means it might not take much to call it to life. You grew up in a family that yells. The only volume they understand is loud. Later in life, you marry this sweet little thing, either direction. And one day they just say, baby, I love you so much, but dude, ma'am, you, sure, her, you, what? You go from 0 to 60 so fast, it scares me. What are you talking about? I'm not mad. You could have fooled me. And it's a blind spot because it's all you ever knew. Now, that doesn't mean, oh, well, you get a pass. You can just yell all you want. No. It means God's brought someone into your life that's helping you see an area of your multi-generational stuff that, you know what? I want it to stop here with me. I want it to stop here with me. Now, that's not always easy. Not always easy, but it always pays off. All right, here's what you want to do. And you can do this yourselves. It's called a genogram. If you kind of look at it for a second, the squares are men, the circles are women. And what you do is you do your current family, and then you go upward to your parents, and then theirs if you know enough to go there. Now, here's the point. You just start looking at it and start writing stuff. You know, like let's say you were coming to me for counseling. You would be the family in the box there. Does that make sense? And what we do is we'd say, well, let's say Sam and Joan. I'd say, well, Sam, tell me about your family. Well, I was, I had one sister and two brothers. Well, we talk a little bit, and then I say, well, what was your dad like? And you can here's what's interesting. Sometimes immediately you feel a difference come. And Sam hesitates. Now, wait a minute. Well, Sam, tell me about your dad. He was never around. He was never around. What do you mean he wasn't around? He worked a lot. If he wasn't working, he was down at the pub. Was he affectionate? No. I knew he loved me. A lot of times I'll hear that. I knew he loved me. Did he say it? No, he didn't say it. Would you like to have heard it? A lot of times that's it. The dude's done. He loses it. Now, what's going on there? All I'm trying to do is help him understand he's the product of a multi-generational story. And you know what, dude? I'm for you, man. I'm for you. And life's not fair, guys, ladies. It's not fair. It's just not. And what we want to provide is, let me get into real touchy area. Well, ma'am, what did I say, Joan? Let's talk about your family. All right. Well, we talk a little bit, this, that, and the other. And then, what was your dad like? And let's say unthinkable things happen. Let's say dad had an affair and mom was bitter. And part of what brought this couple to see me is, she just doesn't trust me. I've never done anything to give her a reason not to trust me. Yeah, you didn't, but her dad did. See what I'm saying? You didn't, but her dad did. And you know what? Just yelling that at her, I never hurt you, that's not going to help. Because in saying I never hurt you, you're hurting her. But what if you said, you know what, baby? I never knew that. I never knew that part of your story. And you know what? That helps me understand some of why we get hung up the way we do. And you know what? I want to be a safe man for you. I want to be a safe man for you. But I'm going to need you to help me learn how. You feel the difference of that? Now, is she going to automatically be all trusting and warm and fuzzy? Probably not. But it'll work. I'm telling you, man, most of the stuff you're fighting in each other, the other person hates as much as you do. They just don't know how to stop yet. And a lot of times it's because you're fighting the fruit instead of the root. And the root's always, listen to this now, this is really, really important. The root is always a right need you're trying to get met the wrong way. A right need you're trying to get met the wrong way. Is it wrong to want to feel safe? No, but if the way you feel safe is controlling everybody, that's not helpful. Is it wrong to want to feel respected? No, but if the way you feel respected is by putting everybody else down, not very helpful. But what you want to learn to do is look past the behavior to the need driving the behavior. Mark, making sense?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes.
I do want to share that there are still quite a few questions.
Yeah.
This has obviously started some conversations and some deep thoughts. And we are going to try and get to some more of the questions.
Probably won't be able to get to all
of them this evening. But what we will be able to do is following our time with Chip, we're going to have a breakout into prayer rooms so that there will be people that can pray for you, with you at the end.
And in a moment, we'll after a couple, maybe we'll take a couple more questions. We'll pose a couple more questions to you, Chip, and then Denise, if you could just tell us how we're going to facilitate that. And I'll make a couple of announcements, and we'll kind of go from there. But
so can we
let me say one thing real quick.
Sure.
And I mean this, guys. Listen to me. I can't see everybody, but it doesn't matter. Listen to me now. You see that thing that's on the screen? You can do that. Here's what I mean. Imagine sitting down as a couple and talking about what your childhood was like. Talking about, because here's the thing, guys. How a young lady's mom and dad loved and nurtured her affects how she gives and receives love now. Ladies, how a man was nurtured, respected, and developed, loved, affects how he carries himself as a man now. Take some time and just do one of these little drawings. And then talk about what was your dad like when you were 2, 3, 5? I'm telling you, you could have some amazing moments together to where you realize, oh, baby, I never realized that's why that triggers you. It could be such a gift to each other. My wife and I both, like, I believe this, you need to know each other's core fear. You need to know each other's core fear. And it always goes back to childhood, always.
Awesome. So, hey, a question for you. I guess it's really, I've got a couple of questions, but one's more of an observation. Someone had said to me, and I kind of took it and kind of ran with it, and I applied it to our lives. They had said that what we do as parents, as a married couple, what we do in moderation, our children will do in excess, right? And I think that applies when I look at, you've been married for 45 years, you have 3 married children, and we always think that our marriage, we want it to be something that our children want to do. They want to look at our marriage and say, hey, we want that, as opposed to reject that.
Right.
So perhaps you could speak to, even if you said that many of us come into like a marriage formed by our childhood experiences, right?
Right.
What we've seen, what we experienced, and it's a growth process. But can you speak to maybe how we turn the corner and we model something that our children's children want to do also?
Let me say something that's, and if I need to explain it, Mark, you or Melissa, call me out on it. Here's the thing about what you just said. What we tend to do when we're adults is one of two things. We either reproduce what we got in our childhood, or we do the opposite. We tend to reproduce it or do the opposite. So for instance, you grow up in a home that's kind of abusive. Well, what we tend to do is either we're a little bit heavy-handed or abusive, or we won't discipline at all. Well, I'm not going to be like them, so we don't discipline at all. You know, you grow up in a home where people are yelled at. Well, what we do is we either become yellers or we just never raise our voice. So it's funny. It's like a knee-jerk reaction. We either do what we saw and experienced, or we do the opposite. My big thing is, for you to get healthier, you've got to spend time around healthier people. I mean, you absolutely have to spend time around healthier people. And here's the thing. You don't even necessarily have to talk to them about it. If you just make the commitment to be around healthier people consistently, you will get healthier, period.
That's true.
You'll get healthier, period.
Okay, so we're not going to get to all the questions, but I think we want to be able to respond to them even after perhaps we'll address them. But here's a question for you. How does one overcome repeated infidelity?
Wow.
Yeah.
Ooh. Gosh, you got my brain going 3 or 4 different directions. Number one, don't process that on your own. Because gosh, I hate to say this, but if you're in a marriage where there's been repeated infidelity, you're as unhealthy as the other person. So, doesn't mean you hit the eject button. It does mean you don't trust your ability to navigate through it. Bottom line is, in a normal, reasonably healthy situation, repeated adultery, you're done. You're done. Now, I said in a fairly normal, healthy situation, which obviously it can't be. But here's the thing. You've got to get somebody that you trust to help you navigate through it. Now, here's what I mean. There's reasons for that behavior, but you're going to need help navigating it. I'm not saying the marriages should be over. I am saying you need help figuring out why you're still there. I'm not saying you shouldn't be, but you need to figure out why you're still there so that you can figure out whether or not you're still there for the right reasons and build back healthy.
Thank you. Hey, so we're up against the clock here, and this has been so good. Hey,
Timely.
but yeah, and timely, right? It's oftentimes we appear on the surface, everything appears to be fine, and you dig just a tiny bit deeper, and you find that there are things that we need to address, and after some period of time, maybe they never get addressed, and it becomes a bigger issue than it needs to be, right?